Welcome back to Divine Mercy Radio's Fall Care-a-thon Joy of the Gospel. We're going to be in here with Father Fred Gatchett this hour, but before we do that, we want to get to one of those trivia questions that you guys love so much. If you haven't listened before or haven't got a question before, well, even if you've gotten a question before, call to 785-621-4110. We'll get you entered into that drawing. So as long as you haven't answered a question and already gotten in there today, you can call in 785-621-4110. So this trivia question is being sponsored by, well, us at Divine Mercy Radio, because you're listening to our Fall Pledge Drive. We've got just a couple of hours left here. A couple people I want to thank, and then I'll get to that trivia question. I want to thank Kyle and Barb Hemmert. They gave $250, and with our matching funds, that becomes $500. Bishop Jerry Vinke, who was in here for the hour right before we went to break, he donated $300 to our cause. And I just want to remind everybody that we are so blessed to have Bishop Vinke and have his support behind us for these Catholic radio waves. He supports us. We would ask that you do the same. Call 785-621-4110. So we are going to get to that question, and that is the same number that you'll call. Get your phones ready. Where did Jesus meet Peter and Andrew? Was it in a church, walking up a mountain, taking care of the sheep, or fishing? Where did Jesus meet Peter and Andrew? Oh, also, before you start ringing in, this is only for people 16 or under. Now that they're out of school and they can get a chance at it, you have to be 16 or under. Where did Jesus meet Peter and Andrew? In a church, walking up a mountain, taking care of sheep, or fishing. 785-621-4110. I'm going to check really quickly and see how many matching funds we have left, and I will get that number for you in just a little bit. All right. We're on with Father Fred Gatchett talking about unveiling the difference between happiness and joy. And we've discussed this a little bit, but we're going to really unpack it deep here this hour. And if there are any questions that you guys have, we have that call in line. So the best way that we're able to give you guys what you want is if you let us know that by calling into 785-621-5061. That's 785-621-5061. We can put your question on the air while we are here. Don't worry, you don't have to be live. If you don't want to, you can just call, talk to the call screener. They'll get it to us, and we'll get the question asked, especially while we have Father Fred here. He'll be able to give you an answer right here in the studio. So call us up at that number. Once again, if you want to donate, call 785-621-4110. All right. Without further ado, Father Fred Gatchett has been a priest for over 30 years, serving in Hays and Salina. He ran the Como Catholic Campus Center at Fort Hays State University while teaching at Thomas More Prep Marian High School in Hays. Later serving as the pastor at St. Joseph Parish here in Hays. He also taught 3 years at Sacred Heart High School in Salina. During his spare time, he wrote the workbooks to the Didache series of high school religion textbooks published by the Midwest Theological Forum. Currently, Father Fred Gatchett is the Vicar General for the Diocese of Salina, pastor of St. Joseph's Church here in Hays, and he teaches religion at TMP Marian and serves as the spiritual director for this very station, all five of them, Divine Mercy Radio, and he records double-edged sword shows for the network when he has time. That's a lot there, sir. How are you doing today?
Oh, so far, so good.
Fantastic. You know, we actually had a question here a couple of days ago about how many times you've been on double-edged sword. You know how many times that was?
Has anybody done? I don't know.
Yeah, it was. I don't remember. It was like 200 and some times.
Have I done that many shows? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. All right. Now Father Fred and I were talking, and I let him know, we've discussed some of this, but let's see what we can do to give everybody what we can do to help you understand really joy, happiness, tie between it, how they're different, anything else. Let us know. Call those numbers if you got a question. All right, Father, where do we go from here?
Well, in the Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life and liberty, life and freedom, I think that belongs in the list, but I'd like to know what was going through Jefferson's head when he put the pursuit of happiness, why he put that in there, because that's a dog chasing its tail.
Yeah.
So I just, well, it was always kind of taken back by that one. People can waste an awful lot of time pursuing happiness as kind of this elusive goal. And then when they never, if they do get it, it goes away. And if they don't achieve it, then they figure, well, I must have failed somehow. And again, it sounds like you guys have probably kind of discussed this a little bit. The word happiness, the root for it etymologically comes from the Old English word called hap, H-A-P. And again, Old English was, one of the precursors of English. English came about because of Old English, German, and Latin. That's why it's such a confused language. It has three parents. And but with Old English, you had hap, and hap is also where you get the word happen from. So happiness happens. The example I've used before talking to kids is one time during my first tour of duty here in Hayes, when I got my first dog, when I got my first husky, and I would take him out, and we'd go for walks, and we go walking along the dike there by Fort Hayes, and I'd cut him loose, and he'd go off and chase rabbits and have a good old time. And I'm walking along one time, and right there in the grass was a $20 bill just blowing along. And, how are you going to find out who owns that? I'm just figuring, well, fortune smiled on me today. And so, was I happy when I picked a $20 bill up off the ground? You bet I was, But, how long did that happiness last? Am I still happy about that? Now it's just an interesting story to tell. I put the bill in my wallet, probably went out and bought some gas or something, and that was kind of that. So happiness happens. Something happens to us that makes us happy, and it's transitory. It doesn't last. As opposed to joy, which is a completely different bird all the way around. In fact, if anybody out there speaks Spanish, Spanish has the two words are the exact same. They have felicidad, which is happiness, and alegría, which is joy. And joy is a different bird altogether. Joy is an internal disposition. Happiness comes from without. Joy comes from within. And that's why, again, if you look in the letter of the Galatians, chapter 5, St. Paul, they're called the fruits of the Holy Spirit. Love, joy, patience, peace, so on. And joy is one of them. And so again, it's one of those words. And I've made a lot of, come up with a lot of sermons over the years, taking apart words that people throw around. And it's like, do you really know what you're saying when you use that word? And a lot of times people don't. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later too, some of those words. But joy is one of them. People think happiness and joy are synonyms, and they're not. They describe totally different things. I think the easiest way to understand it is if you bake me a pie, I will be happy because the pie happened to me, and so I'll be happy as long as the pie lasts. When the pie is gone, it's not that I'm miserable. It's not that I'm crying, but the happiness the pie brought is gone. Whereas if I bake you a pie, I experience joy because joy comes from within. It's comes whenever I give something of myself to somebody else, then we experience joy. And if we work at it, joy is a disposition that is always with us. Even if you find out your best friend just died or something like that, you can still be a joyful person. I think a lot of us know people like that. Thanks be to God. We know people that it isn't that if they get bad news, they just shake it off. They're affected like anybody else, but it doesn't affect that interior disposition they have of, kind of just defaulting towards being a joyful person. And I think that, again, it's too bad that the Declaration of Independence didn't say that, we'd have life, liberty, and, maybe pursue, a joyful disposition. That might be better, But anyway, but I think, that kind of in a nutshell is kind of the difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to cut in really quickly here and thank a few people and congratulate someone here. So I'll start with that congratulations, and that would be to Marcus Johnson, who is our trivia winner. So congratulations to Marcus. The question was, where did Jesus meet Peter and Andrew? And that would be fishing. So congratulations to Marcus. Appreciate you listening and calling in. And then I want to thank Kelton and Jill Steckline, some very good friends of mine who donated $200, and that with our matching funds becomes $400. And also Dean and Julie Hazelhorst. Julie's been in here helping answer phones and really just doing some amazing things up here in the office. And they donated $1,000, and so that becomes a $2,000 gift. So thank you, Dean and Julie. Thank you, Kelton and Jill. Also, Julie says she loves all of the programs that we air here. So join with Dean and Julie and Kelton and Jill, myself, and everybody else who supports this station. Help us to keep the joy of the gospel going out there to as many people as we can reach. 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. We are talking with Father Fred Gatchett, unpacking the difference between happiness, joy, and what all that means. So, Father, let's dig back into it.
Well, again, I think that we've said really kind of what needs to be said about happiness and joy. I think the other one that needs to be unpacked, though, along with that, is love. You know, what love is and what it is not. I think that in our day and age, sad to say, love has been, I coined this word the other day. I don't know if it's a word or not, but love has been pornographized to where that it's some kind of, everybody thinks that love is some kind of a feeling or an emotion or some kind of an emotional state. And the scriptures don't say that. The scriptures say something completely different. You know, when you talk about love of God and love of neighbor, I mean, that's what the 10 commandments, the first 3 commandments are about the love of God, and the last 7 commandments are about the love of neighbor. Jesus says the 2 greatest commandments are to love God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself. But then it's like, okay, what does this look like? Well, again, in our culture where love has been reduced and cheapened to just being an emotion, we wrongly think that, well, if I'm just not filled up with all kinds of warm and fuzzy, bubbly feelings about someone, that I don't love them. Or, when we hear Jesus tell us to love our enemies, we're going, well, good luck with that. Who can possibly do that? Because again, if we think that love is about, a dozen roses and a box of chocolates and some balloons, then, if you have someone that has really wronged us, then how are we going to be able to work up some kind of an emotional attachment to someone that, did something very bad to us? And then we think, well, this admonition to love our neighbors or to love our enemies, that's just, forget that. Or as Dostoevsky says, in the Brothers Karamazov, he talks about, loving one's neighbor. He goes, it's impossible to love precisely one's neighbor, because the closer you get to them, the less you want to love them. And which is probably true too. But that isn't the thing. It is, though, is the scriptures don't say that. Jesus says in the Gospel of St. John, no greater love is there than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. That would be the greatest. The greatest act of love would be to give your life for somebody else. So if that's the greatest, then there's got to be lesser degrees. So, for example, no greater, or a great love would be to give up your day off for your friend. You're looking forward to having the day off to do something, and your buddy's basement got flooded or something. So it's like, okay, I'll go over and help you clean up the mess, or whatever. The idea is that the ultimate sacrifice would be sacrificing our life, but maybe we have to sacrifice some time, or we have to sacrifice some patience or something for the good of somebody else. And that's what love of neighbor looks like. Love of neighbor, good old St. Thomas Aquinas defines love of neighbor as pursuing and working towards the good of the other. And so you can have someone, maybe you got that person at work that everybody has a hard time getting along with, and you're going, really? Love my neighbor? That bozo? But the thing of it is, I think if we can say, well, the guy's kind of a pain in the neck, but God love him, I wish him well. You've loved him. I mean, that by definition, and you've done what you're supposed to do. I think that especially in our day and age, when you have so many ex-spouses running around out there,
Yeah.
all people go through these horrible, painful divorces and stuff, and they go to mass and hear Jesus saying, love your enemies and pray for your persecutors and things like that, and that just like it's like rubbing salt in an open wound from what these people just went through. It's like, well, yeah, but if you think though that love means having some kind of a tremendous emotional response to somebody, and the only emotion you can muster up or that comes up for given this certain person is a bunch of pain and desire to do them ill will, to do them harm, then we say, well, I can't love that person. Well, but it's a start to say, we went through a lot, we've been through hell, but I wish them well. I bear no ill will. I mean, we'll probably never see eye to eye, but they can go their way, I'll go my way, and I wish them the best. If we can say that, we've loved our neighbor, and I think that there certainly is, and there can be a romantic emotional dimension to love. I mean, certainly, hopefully spouses express their love for each other and their affection in many different ways. You hope they do anyway. But the problem is like, a lot of times, people go, well, I just don't feel anything for him or her anymore. So what's your point?
Yeah.
It's not about feeling for them. It's about giving ourselves over for them. St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, wife, for all you know, you may save your husband. Husband, for all you know, you may save your wife. The enterprise of marriage is for the spouses to get each other into heaven.
Yeah.
And so maybe once in a while that might consist of a candlelight dinner, but most of the time it's going to consist of getting up, doing the job, doing the laundry, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids, all that kind of stuff. So again, the first aspect of love is to get this out of our head that somehow or another that it has to have if it doesn't have some kind of an emotional manifestation to it, that it's not love, and that just isn't true.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Let me break in really quickly, Father. I want to thank a few people here. So Mike and Lori Hurdle, they donated $500, and they donated an additional $250 from Hurdle Oil Company. So we've got 750 there, times 2 would be a $1,500 donation with those matching funds. They also wanted to say that Father Fred is a wonderful person. So thanks to Mike and Lori for listening and throwing in that little nice piece of information about Father Fred. And also wanted to thank Dwayne and Karen Dorsweiler. They gave $500, which makes that a $1,000 donation with matching funds. If I'm seeing this correctly, we have, I'm going to check on it really quickly, but I just got this sent in here. We have $725 left in matching funds. So I'm going to check on that just to make sure that's what they sent me. But thanks to Mike and Lori Hurdle, thanks to Dwayne and Karen Dorsweiler, we are almost getting those matching funds used up. Let's get some more calls in here. Keep donating to 785-621-4110. I will also try to get another number on our total where we're at. Oh, as I'm talking here, Dave and Janet Schmidt gave $2,000 more in matching funds. So we have now $2,725. That is awesome. Thank you for Dave and Janet Schmidt. They own a Dave's Auto Repair. They are faithful underwriters. We thank you so very much for your support and everything you've done. They helped us jump back up there with some more matching funds. Nothing better than that. Let's use up those matching funds. 2,725 left. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. We are on talking with Father Fred Gatchett. Right now, we are unpacking what the word love really means, because our society messes things up. Father, I think we see this a lot. And I think this is a lot of the problems that we have, because you'll hear people all the time go, well, why can't we just love each other? And they're talking about some sort of irregular situation that they are living in, especially when we see the mess that the United States made with changing so-called the definition of marriage. And that was a part of that. Well, Why can't you just let
Love
two
is love.
people
Yeah.
love each, and yeah, if you don't have that understanding that, well, actually, no, if you're doing something that's harming someone's soul, then that's not love. So you actually can't say, why can't we just love each other while doing something that is abusing their soul? So where can we take it from there?
Well, then we've talked about love of neighbor. Then there's love of God. What does love of God look like? And I've done this a number of times with in various groups and stuff. And you say, if someone comes up and says, "Do you love your spouse?" And you go, "Well, of course." Do you love your grandchildren? Absolutely. Do you love your brothers or sisters? Yeah. Your family. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then someone says, "Well, do you love God?" And then people get a little bit uncomfortable because they can just knee jerk respond. Well, of course I love the dog, I love my country, I love my family, and so on. You say, but do you love God? And that's a little bit of a different thing, because again, I think most people, at least if they're sane, have a hard time generating or finding some kind of a emotional effective response to God, because you can't see him, you can't touch him. He's very mysterious and so on. And so, in what does the love of God consist? And if a lot of times, a lot of places, they try to manufacture it. You get the drums beaten and you get the altar call going, and people are hooting and hollering and I love Jesus, and everything. And it's like, well, yeah. And then when your little love fest is over with, then what do you got? And so again, I think it's best to go back and just look at the words of Christ himself. He is God. And so in the Gospel of St. John, in chapters 14 and 15, and also in the first letter of John, you can tell John was paying attention to the Last Supper, because then when he writes the letter of John, he takes Jesus' words and teaches them there as well. That there's a number of places in John 14 and 15 where Jesus says, "If you love me, you will buy me a box of chocolates." No, it doesn't say that. If you love me, you'll come up and give me a big warm hug. No, it doesn't say that either. He says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So in the mind of Christ, the love of Christ consists in keeping his commandments. And we can try to keep his commandments and really have no affect or feeling about it at all. It's just that this is the right thing to do. And so therefore, my Savior told me that he wants me to clothe the naked and visit the sick and feed the hungry and, pray for my persecutors. And so that's what he told me to do. That's what I'm going to do. And so, again, the love of God, and when you go to the first letter of John, St. John says, the one who says that he knows him, but does not keep his commands is a liar. And so, the love of neighbor consists in pursuing and working towards the good of the other. The love of God consists in keeping his commands. And at least that's what Jesus says. Now, again, if you don't want to do what Jesus says, then don't, but that's what he says. And so, so again, I think that, if we understand the biblical admonition to love on the Bible's terms, we can see it's not easy, but I think it's a lot more doable than manufacturing some kind of an emotional response when there may not be one there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would say that, that's also part of the problem with people church shopping, and people leaving, because, well, the mass is dull and stuff like that. I heard Father Mike Schmitz once say that the heart of religion is worship and the heart of worship is sacrifice. And what is that sacrifice? Sacrifice is the Eucharist. Christ made that sacrifice. We just have to go and enter into that. And so, that's, I think, perfectly said, that when we don't understand what worship looks like, and we change it instead into this, I don't know, this happy clappy, like emotional response.
That's one of my favorite words to attack too, because again, you'll especially with the younger people, well, Father, we want to do praise and worship. Really? What does that mean? Well, Carl here has a guitar and Bobby has his bongo drums, and we're gonna play songs out of the hymnal. And I said, well, that sounds like fun. That can lighten your heart a little bit and everything.
Sure.
But it's not worship.
Yeah.
And again, so I think in church land, in Christian land, we have these words again, like, love, worship, we throw these words around, but it's like, do we really stop to think about what they mean?
Yeah.
Because, worship, I think it's easiest to understand, easiest to explain it with three examples. There are other examples, but in my never to be humble opinion, the first one you could argue with, the next two you can't argue with. But the first one, one of the greatest acts of worship in the Bible comes from good old Jeremiah, when he says, "You duped me, O Lord, and I allowed myself to be duped." In other words, what he's talking about is whenever God comes up and wants him to be his prophet, Jeremiah's going, "That sounds like fun. Yeah, I'll be a prophet. I'll get out there and give people what for." Well, he does that. He starts, proclaiming what God wants him to proclaim, and all of a sudden he finds everybody hates him,
Yeah.
and he's on everybody's bad list and everything. And so he goes, "God, you deceived me. You pulled me into this, and I allowed myself to be deceived." And it says, the more I speak your message, the more grief I get and everything. And so Jeremiah says, "So I say to myself, I will speak of him no more. But then it becomes like fire burning within my bones, and I weary holding it in." And so here you have Jeremiah going, being God's prophet has brought me nothing but grief, but I don't have any choice. I have to go out and prophesy in God's name. That's worship. That's the third, in my opinion, the third greatest act of worship in the Bible. Now, 1 and 2 are not up for grabs. You can't argue with these. The second greatest act of worship in the Bible came from a young lady that said, "I am the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done to me according to your word." There's the second greatest act of worship in the Bible. The greatest act of worship in the Bible came on Holy Thursday night. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." That's worship. That is the greatest act of worship that anyone has ever done or anyone will ever be able to do. So we can see that to worship is to serve, kind of like what Father Mike Schmitz was saying. To worship is to serve. To worship, really, there's very little worship that goes on at Mass. The most of the worship goes on outside the walls of the church when we're striving to do God's will. That's what worship is.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. That helps a lot, because then that goes toward being able to say, you know what? He also says in that talk, and I love it. You know what? The Mass is not about you.
Yep.
So I love it. Sometimes I need a good punch in the face, not a real one, but a good spiritual slap. Like, yeah, that's good. That's something that I need to hear. So I stop focusing so much on myself, and get it focused back to where it needs to be.
Well, and the thing is, I think most people know this intuitively. They just don't know that they know it. I mean, my kids at school probably get sick of me hearing me say this, because I'll ask them a question and they look at me with this blank stare on their face, and I'll go, "Look, you know the answer. You just don't know that you know the answer." And then, because then when I give them the answer, "Oh yeah, I guess I did know that." Yeah. Well, it's kind of the same thing when we talk about things like worship and what Mass is all about and so on. You can have someone, and you hear people say this. I'm sure you've heard at least once in your life, where someone will say, "Yeah, I remember on such and such a day, the phone rang, and that's when they told me that, my spouse or whatever had cancer," whatever the case, somebody had cancer, somebody got in a car wreck, whatever. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get up, and I went to Mass. And, I don't remember what the gospel reading was about. I don't remember the priest that said the Mass, but that was the most meaningful Mass I ever went to in my life. Well, why? Well, it's because of what you brought in with you. You went to Mass looking for, looking for some kind of consolation because you had gotten some bad news or whatever. Well, of course it's gonna be meaningful to you. And so the trick to it then is, every week whenever we go to Mass, what are we bringing in with us? That if we're just going in there and sitting and crossing our fingers hoping that the sermon's good that Sunday, then we wonder why we quote unquote don't get anything out of it, because we never put anything into it. And so, if we go to Mass, with the idea that, there's something here that people have died for. There are places on earth to this day that people wanting to go to Mass are taking their life into their own hands.
Yeah.
There have been periods of history and places where, the soldiers break in while someone's having a secret underground Mass in somebody's basement, and they haul everybody off and put them on trial and shoot them or put them in jail or whatever. I mean, there's something, if there's something at Mass, or there's something to it that makes people put everything on the line, that, they will, risk, their freedom and their very lives. It means there's got to be something intrinsic to the Mass that makes people want to do that. And if other people are missing it, well, then I guess you got to do a little bit more homework or something and find out what it is before you go, because it's kind of a Fulton Sheen kind of idea that you hear these stories all the time about people who left the faith. I'm going, if they really knew what they were leaving, they wouldn't have left to start with.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think so. Let me break in really quickly because I want to thank Father Fred for donating $500 and St. Joseph's Church for donating $500. That's awesome. Helps us use up some more of those matching funds. And so that $1,000 donation together there turns into $2,000 with those matching funds. So it looks like we probably have about $1,725 of matching funds. We're coming close to the end here, folks. I'm going to check on a full total of what we have for all of our funds toward that goal of $125,000. We're getting closer and closer every minute. Please continue to help us out. Please join with Father Fred, St. Joseph's Church, myself, and all others. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. All right, talking with Father Fred, we're just unpacking all kinds of different words, the way that our society gets it wrong, and maybe even we get it wrong, and helping us to understand how to then give God his due, how to give others their due, and different things like that. Father, I think part of the problem is everybody wants to turn the priest into their dancing monkey. Everybody wants, like you were saying, if I don't have a good homily, well, then it wasn't a good mass. Well, no, that's not the point. And in fact, I think I've heard, you've probably done this yourself. There are priests who are like, oh yeah, I started writing down my homilies because they were, I thought they were so good. And then I came back to them several years later and I was like,
who wrote this drivel?
Who wrote that?
Yeah.
I think that's the problem too, is showing up, but that's our world. See, our world teaches us, your smartphone in your pocket, mine over here on the table. The world tells us instant gratification for everything. And so we go into Mass with that same mindset, then we're going to come out of it being like, well, that wasn't the most moving homily ever. Well, so what? But that's what we go in thinking is like, I need Father to make me laugh and clap and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Anywho, all right. Where can we take this from here then?
Well, again, it's kind of interesting. So we're picking these words apart. It came up in the Bible, my Adultia Bible study class, and it came up at school. And I always think it's interesting whenever the same topic comes up in two different kind of forums like that maybe it's the Holy Spirit trying to tell us something,
Mm-hmm.
And that was jealousy and envy.
Oh yeah.
What about those two? Because if you look in Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through about 21 or 22, somewhere around there, St. Paul has this big, long laundry list of sins. Now, the works of the flesh are obvious: fornication, licentiousness, idolatry. He goes on through these sins. And he said one of them is envy. Then he lists a few more, and then he says jealousy. Mm-hmm. Well, so evidently envy and jealousy must be two different things.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. They're not synonyms. And I think the easiest way to understand it is that, I'm jealous of what I have. And that is to say, it's mine. Keep your grubby mitts off of it. I jealously guard that which is mine. I don't want anybody else to, touch my stuff. I'm envious of what you have. And I think that's the easiest way to explain it, that, again, because St. Paul has them listed as two separate things. And again, if I'm, just so worried about my stuff and I can't bear the thought of somebody else getting anywhere near my stuff, well, that's not good for me. And again, envy, the idea that, I see something you have and I don't have it. And so I get mad and pout about it and maybe even hate you for it because you have something I don't have. We can see that doesn't do us any good. I think that one of the lessons I try to drive home when I'm talking to people about some of these moral issues is that I don't think it really does us a whole lot of good when someone goes, "Was that a sin? Is that a sin if you do that? Is envy a sin?" Envy's a capital sin. Yeah, one of the capital sins. Yeah. One of the deadly sins. Yeah. But the thing is, I think that whenever we distill things down to saying whether it's a sin or not, I mean, I suppose it's good to know if things are pleasing or not pleasing to God. But I think a better question is, does it generate a good result?
Oh yeah.
Does envy take me to where I need to be? Does jealously guarding my pile of stuff make me the kind of person that I need to be? And I think that again, if we look at that, if we look at that criteria and apply it to anything, you were talking earlier about the so-called same-sex marriage, love is love and so on. It's like, well, okay, let's just put aside for a minute that St. Paul very roundly condemns sodomy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And instead, let's just look at the result.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, well, when I look at the gay community, and by that I mean, I'm going to be very precise here. When I use the word gay, I am saying a person with a same-sex attraction who is acting on it.
Yeah.
They are pursuing a genital sexual relationship with another person of the same sex. Whenever you look at these folks as a group, they have inordinately high rates of alcoholism and drug abuse and suicide. The domestic violence rate in the gay community is really high. And then to say nothing of, AIDS and hepatitis and so on. And, one statistic I saw that they said, the average male in the United States, of course, for me, I think my life expectancy is probably about 77 or something like that. And he's only got like 14 years left. But like for the kids I teach at school, their life expectancy is going to be, probably well up in the 80s. And but if you take, again, someone my age, making it 77, but if you have a gay person, someone that's adopted this lifestyle, their life expectancy is like 42. And so, rather than dance around, love is love, or is that a sin or something, just say, well, does this take us where we want to go?
Yeah.
Do you really want to adopt a lifestyle that's going to push you into a higher probability of drug abuse, suicide, alcoholism, domestic violence, and, probably cut your life expectancy by 40-45%?
Yeah.
And ask ourselves, do I really want to go there? And I think any, sane person would say no.
Yeah, I think so. And that's part of the problem we have in our world is being able to look at things in an objective manner and actually look at, well, what's the fallout going to be? So we're talking with Father Fred here. We're getting through all kinds of good stuff, talking about different words, how we use them wrong, how our society uses them wrong, what they actually mean, and all kinds of things like that. I want to give you guys an update really quickly that Pat and Leroy Lang gave $250. Thank you so very much to Pat and Leroy Lang. That is a $500 donation with with those matching funds. I'm sorry, I twisted my words here because I'm also looking, and we got an anonymous donation with another $2,000 in matching funds. Man, they are pouring in. Thank you so very much, folks. Knights of Columbus from St. Fidelis in Victoria donated $750. So that is a $1,500 donation there with those matching funds. We also got another anonymous donation of $500 and a $25 donation from William Burke. So thank you all so very much. Use up those matching funds. This is just so beautiful. As I'm sitting here, we got $2,000 in funds. We got people using them up. We got $2,000 more in funds. We got people using them up. Let's get through them all. That shows us that you guys really appreciate it. We really appreciate you. Thank you so very much. We have our spiritual director right here with us. And so we thank you guys for listening and for calling in. Also, I want to thank Jeff and Gwen Klepper. They donated $500 also. Keep them coming. Keep calling 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. We got another anonymous donation of $50. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. 785-621-4110. All right, Father Fred, let's get back to just picking apart misused words, things in society, and the way that, we just don't look at things right from an objective lens, and instead give into our morally subjective opinions.
Yep. Well, that's it's one of the things that people just don't seem to. If you just take a few seconds to think it through, you go, "This is just really untenable. This doesn't work." I remember years ago when I was my first round of teaching at Thomas More Prep, and they had done a interview thing in the morning on the news, and luckily it was on YouTube that afternoon, and so I was able to show it to the kids. And I showed it to my seniors because we did morality, and they were on the campus of Notre Dame University, America's premier Catholic university. Cough, cough, hack, hack. I always say Notre Dame's about as Catholic as Joe Biden, but they were talking to these students and saying one time, and they asked this girl. They said, "Well, how do you know what's right and what's wrong? How can you tell right from wrong?" Well, I guess it just really kind of depends on how you feel about a certain topic, but I guess since everybody feels differently, we really can't know what's right and wrong. Really, you can tell that university's taught you a lot, lady. And so I talked to the kids and I said, how could you prove to her that even she does not believe that? I mean, again, it's something that she kind of came up with, but how do you prove to her that even she does not believe that? And one of the kids one time, he hit it right on the head, literally. He goes, "Go up and punch her in the face." I said, "That's right. Because if you do that, she's going to say, 'Why did you do that?' Oh, that's because that's how I felt. You just got through saying that right and wrong is determined by how you feel about something. And I felt like punching you in the face. So that's what I did." "Well, you can't do that." "Well, why not? You told me that right and wrong is determined by feelings. And that's how I felt." And so again, you just kind of call some of this stuff into question and go, do you really see what you're saying? Do you understand what you're saying? I saw, Bishop Vinke has this going on this, it's called chapter 29.
Acts 29.
Acts 29.
Yeah.
There's 28 chapters in the Acts of the Apostles, and then the 29th chapter is us going out and evangelizing. And one of the priests in there was doing a presentation, and he was talking about, it was at some kook university, and there was some gal there that taught, I don't know, literature or sociology or something. And she was talking about, how the various cultures in the world historically and to this very day, how they all have their own different kind of creation story. And then she, she's just sitting there saying in her college professor-esque, authoritative way that, well, they're all the same. The Garden of Eden story, or the story, of the gods of Olympus, or the story of the Babylonian gods, or the Egyptians, whatever. They're all the same. It's like, no, honey, they are not.
No, they're not.
The creation story in Genesis is about as unique as it gets, because, the other creation stories, the gods with a small g, first of all, there's many of them.
Yep.
And second of all, the gods themselves are subject to higher authorities, the fates. And so their creation stories are usually laced with violence. They're laced with competition between the various gods of the small g and so on. Whereas the creation story from the book of Genesis is the act of one supreme, all-powerful God. And whenever he gets through making stuff, he says, "Hey, that's pretty dang good. I like that."
Yeah.
And so again, a creation that is created good out of love for what is created and so on, that is absolutely unique. And for people to just dismiss it, all multiculturalism, we have to be culturally sensitive. We can't say anyone's better than the other. Yeah, you can, and so, again, the stuff gets thrown around like worship and love and things like that. And no one really ever stops to think about, what it really means and what they're saying.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to break in really quickly and ask that second question of the hour. So call 785-621-4110. Here you go. Who was the first human God created? Was it Eve, Cain, Abel, or Adam? Who was the first human that God created? A, Eve, B, Cain, C, Abel, D, Adam. 785 621-4110. You have to be 16 years of age or younger, 16 or younger. 785-621-4110. If you've got a question for Father Fred here in the next 10 minutes, call 785-621-5061, and you can ask that question to us while we're here. 785-621-5061. All right, I'm going to get back to talking with Father Fred. We're unpacking all kinds of stuff here. One of the things that you brought up, Father, all the when you're talking about different religions and stuff like that, and you're talking about people who are like, well, Christianity is really intolerant, and you're like, well, yeah, it is in a certain way, because Jesus didn't leave open the option for other religions when he said, I am the way. So I think people misunderstand that too. Would you give us a little insight into tolerant and intolerant?
Well, again, I think tolerance means do it my way. The way that the word gets used. I mean, when you look at the word tolerance, you look at the word tolerate. It takes a direct object, right? Like someone would tolerate. They talk about the chemotherapies today are better tolerated than the ones from 20 years ago, or your neighbor paints his house Pepto-Bismol pink, and you have to tolerate that. Well, the very definition of tolerance, of tolerating things, means that what you're tolerating is something that's bad. No one tolerates a perfectly grilled ribeye steak.
Yeah.
No one tolerates a beautiful day out at the lake. No one tolerates sitting by the fire and scratching the dog's ears. Those are things that we enjoy. And so again, the very nature of the word tolerance and tolerate means you're being told to tolerate something that you don't like. You tolerate something that's unpleasant, tolerate something that's bad. And so this word, again, the whole tolerance thing, that word and what it's come to represent was a stepchild of the gay movement. That you have to tolerate us. Well, again, by using the word tolerate, you're admitting that what you're telling me to tolerate is something that's bad, because that's what tolerance means. That's the very definition of it. And so then, but the idea with tolerance is it means you tolerate what I tell you to tolerate, and if you don't, it's because you're intolerant.
No.
And I always say, well, how tolerant are those who demand tolerance with the intolerant?
None.
And so if you're not going, if you're going to demand tolerance, it has to cut both ways. You have to tolerate me too. Well, no, I don't. Well, and see, there's where all the fight comes in, because all this this battle cry around tolerance is just it's logically bankrupt, and it just doesn't hold water.
Yeah, very good. And it is also not just it's not centered around objectivity. That's what they're really getting down to is I don't really care. I have found that, at least if somebody's kind of screaming that battle cry, they don't really care, like you were saying, what your opinion is or what the truth is. They just say, no, you're going to accept and adopt my way of life come hell or high water.
Basically. Or I'll call you a name. I'll say you're closed-minded, you're bigoted, you're homophobic, you're intolerant, whatever.
Yeah.
I always maintain, Hitler was very tolerant. He was tolerant to everybody that thought like he did.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know. I read some a while back. There was some kind of a sociological term now that whenever the conversation goes, how long does it take until someone brings up Hitler?
Oh yeah.
And but again, I think people talk about being tolerant. It's like, well, all these Mao Zedong, Hitler, all these people that murdered millions and millions of people during the 20th century, they're very tolerant of everyone who thought just like they did.
Yep.
And again, I think that the people nowadays that are out there screaming tolerance the loudest, they're the same way. That you agree with me and you're tolerant, disagree with me and you're not. So
yeah.
it's a big joke.
Yes. All right. I want to break in and congratulate Andrew Ochoa. Andrew Ochoa just won the second trivia question of the hour, and that was, who was the first human being created by God? And that correct answer is Adam. Good job on that one, Andrew. We'll get you entered into that drawing, which will be here in just about 1 hour. Also want to thank Linda Miller, who donated $500. So that becomes 1,000 with some of those new matching funds that we got. So thank you to Linda and to the donors of those matching funds. She says Father Fred is the best teacher. All right. Thanks, Linda. We appreciate that. You're listening to us on our fall Care-a-thon, Joy of the Gospel. Call into 785-621-4110. Join with Nathan and Jennifer Lang, who just pledged $250. So that becomes $500 with those matching funds. Thank you for Nathan and Jennifer. Nathan is only about 10 feet from me. So thank you very much for that. As they say that they love having Father Fred back in Hayes. So we appreciate it. We appreciate all the support. Please join with Nathan and Jennifer, my wife and myself, and all of us, Father Fred in here, who support this station and believe in its mission of helping to save souls. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. All right, Father, we got about 9 minutes. Where can we go for our last 9 minutes?
Well, the thing is, here we are, not really in the thick of Advent. We're still just kind of starting it, but we're getting pretty close to being in the middle of it. And every year during Advent, all the priests will tell you, we do a lot of confessions during Advent, have Advent reconciliation services and so on. And a lot of folks just find their way into church to go to confession. One of the things I learned years ago from my friend, the late Father Albert de Sanctis, he was the pastor out of Ellis at the time, and I was running the campus center at the time. And he calls up one time and says, "Hey, you want to go out to lunch?" "Yeah, sure." So he hops in his truck and drives over to Salina, or drives over here to Hayes, picks me up at the campus center. "And where do you want to go eat?" "I don't know." So that's always the fun thing whenever you try to go out and eat, where you want to go. Anyway, so we decided we're going to go. We're driving along, and he says, "Yeah," he goes, "the other day, yesterday I was hearing confessions before Mass." And I said, "You hear confessions on Tuesday?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I always go sit in the confessional for 20 minutes before Mass. Don't you? You're not doing anything else." And I thought, well, that's a pretty good point. And so then at the campus, so this had been 25 years ago, I decided, well, okay, we're just going to have, if I have Mass, we're having confessions before Mass. That's all there is to it. And just started offering it. And, it started off kind of slow. Most of the time I'd sit in the confessional and do my liturgy of the hours, do my Vespers. But then all of a sudden word got out. You can go to confession at the campus center before the evening Mass. And next thing you know, sometimes I'd have to look out the door and say, "Sorry, folks, I got to start Mass here in 5 minutes."
Yeah.
If you want to stay, you can go to confession after Mass. I'll come back, but more and more people just kind of started coming. And one of the first things to do when I got back to St. Joe's was to say, Monday through Friday after the 6:30 Mass from 7 to 7:30, I will hear confessions I hear confessions at St. Joe's 7 days a week. And you make it available and people come. And the thing is, it seems like it's always during Advent and Lent. And those of you that have been following me on Catholic Radio, you've probably heard me tell this story before, but it bears repeating because it just happened again the other day. And that is, someone will come in, they go behind the screen, which is fine, and "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 38 years since my last confession.
Wow.
But I was listening to the Catholic radio station the other day, and I think it's time." And so, and again, I just, every year there's a couple, 1, 2, 3 souls that come back to confession because they're listening to Catholic radio. So don't think that, these Care-a-thons and all these things we do to keep the station going, we're just blathering mindlessly out into the airwaves. People are hearing this stuff and it's having an impact on their lives.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for that. As Father is our spiritual director here, obviously he's praying for us. Please pray for us. Join with him in doing that. So, Father, do you have any last thoughts before you give us your priestly blessing?
Well, just that it's Advent. Let's try to take some time to find some peace. It's supposed to be a peaceful season, and where we can, maybe just take a little bit of time and whatever it is, make yourself a cup of hot cocoa or a cup of hot tea or something, and curl up and just put yourself in the presence of God and try to find a little bit of peace before Christmas time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Will you give us your blessing?
Sure. And may mighty God bless you and keep you. Let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he look upon you kindly and give you his peace, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks.
All right. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Fall Care-a-thon, Joy of the Gospel. We just had Father Fred Gatchett in here with us, and we got to unpack all kinds of wonderful things. So thank you for being in here with us and staying with us. Thank you to all of our donors. We really appreciate that.